Okay, last class. Last class for this apologetics study. It's been a long study, I feel like. I guess an entire quarter. Um, but I think it's been a good study. I think it's been a necessary study also. But since kind of open up the floor a little bit, just before we really get into it, what have you learned in this class that you think has either helped strengthen your faith, or also something that you think, hey, you know what, that right there is something that I might be able to talk to somebody about, maybe in your circle of people, or something like that. Maybe you think it's something that you could really discuss with somebody if you ever got yourself in that conversation. Surely some of you learned something. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And certainly all very close together too, as far as the time frame. Yep. Yeah, not we're talking a generation, if that, if you consider Clement, who wrote. Yeah. What else?
Be more prepared to defend the gospel
How so?
with, with some of the,
I mean, is there anything in particular that you're nailing down that?
well, just when we began, even from the book of Luke, where
There all the time, and they're finding stuff and they post stuff, and it's really crazy. If you just side note, if you ever want to follow, it's called Bible Land Passages. You can. They have a Facebook and all that. This is not a plug necessarily, but I'm going to use it. Um, but it's called Bible Land Passages. They have a great YouTube channel, but they also post stuff all the time about things that they find over there. Very, very cool stuff. Sometimes they'll post. You ever seen those pictures that people post, and it's like an interactive picture. It's kind of odd, but yeah, yeah. Have you seen those? Yeah, those are pretty trippy, aren't they? Yeah, but they post these pictures like they're standing in a place in Corinth or something, or like an old synagogue or something. And it's like, this is the place where so and so used to stand, or something like that. But you can like look around. You just do your phone like that, and you're there, like you're looking in the spot. It's incredible. So really cool stuff. But Bible Land Passages, that's a really good. John Moore really does a great work with that, and some others that I know of. Anyway, but yeah, we didn't even scratch archaeology a lot, which I think is one of the biggest compelling points that points to everything being real and true and so forth. Anything else that has struck you in this time of, yeah, spit it.
the contemporary secular writings of the apostles
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
that confirm or reinforce or reaffirm
Yeah.
by their and you have people will say that the Bible is just a nicely written fairy tale. Well, not when you've got other areas or other
Corroborating sources.
corroborating sources that are referencing scripture and referencing the existence of the apostles at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
Other
Absolutely. Those are probably my top two. Outside the Bible, contemporary sources like that, early church father, apostolic father writings, and archaeology. Those are probably my top two that I would say you probably need to look into that if you've got questions about some stuff, because it is quite compelling. Yeah.
Most people today, when they want to talk with you about the Bible and they have a problem with religion
Yeah.
or anything, they repeat somebody else's argument that they've heard.
It's a lot of regurgitated stuff.
Or college, peers, professors, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's usually filled with a lot of red herrings from a logical standpoint. And so if you can identify those and say, it's like when somebody starts talking about, hey, this is what we're going to do to improve the roads, and someone says, but what about the schools? Okay, it has nothing to do with fixing the roads. Okay, so if you can see through all that
Mm-hmm.
and find a satisfactory answer that doesn't address the roads and the schools, that addresses the source of
Mm-hmm.
what they're saying, and you can throw a new tangent for them to consider instead of just perpetuating the myth that they've grown up believing.
Which is what we've just been trying to do, right? That's it. We're just trying to say, hey, think about this. If you haven't looked at this, you need to look at this. Think about it. That's it. That's it. Because a lot of people haven't. A lot of people. I mean, I've seen comments on threads before. There's like, there's no evidence at all for the existence of God. Well, that's just ridiculous. Because there is. There's plenty. Archaeology says so. You can't deny that stuff. I mean, you're going to have to deal with some of that. Anyway. Yeah.
Historical things. Growing up and everything, they say, I don't believe, or question about it, why do you believe in history?
Yeah. Because the Bible's rooted in history. Yeah, it is history. It's a historical book at the same time. So absolutely. So hopefully we've opened up some minds, or opened up some eyes a little bit. Maybe you feel a little bit more acquainted with things, maybe a bit more confident in some things to discuss. Don't forget these things, though. Some of this stuff we don't hit a lot in the church, and I think sometimes it maybe just kind of gets pushed to the side. But don't forget this stuff, because it's very prominent, it's very prevalent in society. So anyway, but so we didn't quite finish up something last week, but what we were talking about were these things here, that objective moral values exist. That's the proposition, really. Okay, things that we were trying to prove. We were kind of just talking through some things last time about that, and we were looking at things that that are there that support that claim. Okay. That there are objective or realities, okay, that are there. Which objective means what? Outside. What else does it mean? Objective.
Universal standard.
Universal standard. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So things that stand no matter what, right? It's regardless of any opinion of what someone thinks, or if they agree with it or not. They are innately right, or they are innately wrong. Okay, they're right because they're right. They're wrong because they're wrong. These are things that are not subjective, as some people would claim. They are objective truths about morality or behavior or principles or conduct. Okay, but the question we were trying to answer was, how do you know? How do we know that there are these objective truths, and how do we know that how do we know where they come from? Okay, that was really the question. And one thing we had said was, well, there seems to be within people a moral intuition. There seems to be this kind of moral awareness about people. Something that, causes like an immediate reaction that something is wrong here. I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to work through anything or do long division to figure it out. No, this is just wrong, right? Sometimes we feel those things. They are things that seem like they're self-evident. They're underlying. They are understood, yet unspoken truths. Does that make sense? Okay, that it seems to be the case there. And things that get, for the most part, kind of a natural moral reaction. So we said that, since that seems to be there within people, and there's widespread consistency in that across time, people, and cultures, then there may be an underlying objective morality there. Okay? And what we're trying to answer is, okay, where did that standard come from? Right? Where did it come from? What gave you that moral intuition, that moral awareness to say, okay, there's something up with that? That's the key. Trying to figure that out. What gave you that thinking right there? Okay? And we talked about how, moral subjectivity, we talked about that, and that, disagreement on something does not necessarily eliminate a truth. Not just because you disagree, that doesn't mean it eliminates a truth that stands there, okay? Doesn't matter if you agree with it or not, right? We talked about how culture, someone's upbringing, their influences, their environment, that still, it doesn't take away the fact that a moral judgment can be made. And then this is the one we didn't get to, and we'll get further than this tonight. But there's also this idea of moral progress. Okay, moral progress, like a societal thing. Moral progress. Okay, sometimes what points us in the direction that objective moralities may exist and are true is the fact that, societies sometimes, it's almost like they try, like naturally try to push for something to get better, as if we are trying to progress towards something. I don't know if you notice that sometimes. Or like for situations to be less harsh, okay? Or things in a society to get to a less hostile environment. Not necessarily because the law says so or the law of the land says so, but because it just seems like the right thing to do.
Humanitarianism.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah. Okay, so societies sometimes, they make a push for things, it seems, that they say ought to be. This ought to be done. This ought to be like this, okay? Whether it's trying to, these are realities, trying to end human trafficking, trying to abolish slavery even, or abolish abortion, or protect our children, or anything like that, or even have just equal justice, right? And fair treatment. Societies sometimes see these things as like moral obligations to work towards that kind of transcends beyond preferences, as if they are trying to progress towards something that's better. Have you noticed that? Am I crazy? I'm crazy? Oh. No, I know. Wait. Don't go there. Stop, sir. That's where we're headed. But anyway, I'm building up there, Russ.
The idea of seeking a utopian society.
Yes.
Contradicts
Yes.
that idea of having no moral compass.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Opposites of love, like they want you to be you nowadays, you are perfect and it means you love everything. Just moving towards that.
Yeah. Kind of seems to be there even in that. Yeah. Okay, so that's sometimes what societies push for. And the overarching question is, okay, what is that and why is that? Right? Why do we think that that's better, whatever it is? Why do we think that would be good, or why do we think that would be right? Okay? You see, the fact is, the fact that we have these things that we can observe, really it testifies and it provides strong evidence that objective moral values exist because humans consistently do things and act as though they do. Consistently. Okay? By our very nature, we testify to that. So that's another one. That's another reason. Moral progress is what you see a lot of times in societies. Now, if we were to go to the Bible, and we will be going to the Bible because that's how I wanted to end this, I'm not asking you to answer this, but does the Bible confirm this? Right? Does the Bible confirm this? Are there moral standards that appear in Scripture, even though there may not be anything said about them, but they seem to be there? Okay? Are there moral standards of right and wrong without God or Scripture ever explicitly saying so? Okay? That's what we want to look at now. And there are a few examples that I have pulled in which we'll look at. Okay. Now, let's go to Genesis chapter 4. Okay, Genesis chapter 4 should be a very familiar account for all of us. What account is this? Right there at the beginning? Cain and Abel. Okay, what did Cain do to his brother Abel? Let's start thinking through some of these things just from the top. All right, what did Cain do to his brother Abel? He murdered him. He murdered his brother, his own brother, in the field. Okay, doesn't tell us how he did it. Actually, sometimes it's always depicted. Well, he grabbed a rock. Doesn't say that. Anyway, he murdered him in the field. Okay, now we are well before the law of Moses gets into place, right? We're in Genesis here. Okay, we're before Abraham right here. Okay, now up to this point, has it been said, at least that we can see and know of, that people should not murder? Think about it. Nope. There has not been. That's right. So nothing has been said of you should not murder people. Now, when God approaches him and asks him about where his brother is, what does he try to do? He's got attitude. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, he tries to pass it off as if he doesn't have a clue what God's talking about. You know, he says in verse 9, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Like, boy, you got the audacity to say that to God, man. Anyway, yeah, you kind of feel that right there, right? Yeah, that's what he says. Pretty sarcastic answer. So, I think Cain knew good and well what he did and knew exactly where his brother was, dead in the field. And even though he tries to pass that off, God already knew what was up. God already knew what was up, and he said, "What have you done, Cain? What have you done?" The voice, remember what God said? The voice, what's he say? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. God knew exactly what happened. He's giving Cain a chance to fess up. Kind of like what he did with his mom. Remember that? It's like, what have you done? It's like, he did it. Right? But anyway, so God knew that he had killed him. And Cain was held accountable for that, and Cain was punished for that. Okay, now, does the Bible provide for us here in this instance, in this account, some evidence that a moral standard existed? Does the Bible provide that right here? Yes, it does. How?
By condemnation of God.
Go on.
God said, why'd you do this? It was wrong. Well, punishment.
Okay, so we see so there's stuff that testifies here that there is a moral standard that was in place. He got punished. What else? He knew he was wrong. What did you say? Well, yeah, no written law, hardly anything written down, right? So far as we know, nothing up to this point in Scripture had been said about not murdering people. Okay? The first instance you even see of that actually doesn't come until Genesis chapter 9 and verse 6. And that's right after Noah and his family get off the ark. And God is kind of talking to him about some stuff. And he says, okay, and really it's not even explicit. It's kind of a nod to it here, actually. He says, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he has made man. So that's that right there. We're 9 chapters into Genesis, and that's the first time that we see a prohibition against murder. Okay? And then you don't see it come up again until the 10 Commandments, and that's well into Exodus chapter 20. Okay? So it seems that there was this underlying objective morality there that murder was wrong. All right? It wasn't even explicitly stated. Okay? It was never stated, but God, Cain knew what he did was wrong. Okay, and God judged him for it. And so, it seems to me that there was a moral standard that said, murder is wrong. All right? Let's go to our next example. Does that make sense? Okay? We're trying to find it in Scripture now. Does Scripture lay this out for us at all? Stay in Genesis. Go to Genesis chapter 18. Okay, in Genesis chapter 18, you've got Yahweh appearing to Abraham. In fact, it says that there were 3 men that he saw, right, by the oaks of Mamre. I wonder what those looked like. Maybe they were giant oaks. I don't know. Anyway, he saw them there. Okay, and so Abraham makes preparations to provide some hospitality to them. Remember, he runs into the tent. It's like, Sarah, get the bacon. Let's go. There's some people here. Anyway, I always think about that and how that all went down in my mind. Like, anyway, I bet it was kind of humorous. But anyway, so he's makes preparations for some hospitality, and then as he's walking with those 3, they all kind of turn. If you can picture it, they all kind of turn and they all kind of just look down to Sodom. They look down to where Sodom is. And in Genesis 18:20, what does Genesis 18:20 say?
So Yahweh said, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly great.
Okay, now what their what is exceedingly grave? No, not the outcry. Their sin. No, you're good. Their sin. Now again, hang on. Okay, where are we at in the timeline? Have we even hit Moses yet? No. Do we even have the law yet? No. And there's nothing written down so far as we know to these people that says this is a sin, this is a sin, and this is a sin. We don't exactly have that nor see that. Yet, God says they are sinning exceedingly. Now, it does say in Genesis chapter 13, you bump back 5 chapters, Genesis 13, when Abraham and Lot separate, Genesis 13, 12, and 13, it does say Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now, the men of Sodom were evil and sinners, exceedingly so, against Yahweh. So, we do see prior to this in Genesis 18 that the people there were sinners and they were evil people. Also, Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 49 and 50 reveal some of what they were doing. Behold, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had lofty pride, abundant food, and quiet ease. But she did not strengthen the hand of the afflicted and needy. Then they were haughty and committed abominations before me, so I removed them when I saw it. All right, so apparently there seemed to be this underlying morality that was wrong that they were committing in the city of Sodom. Okay? Pride, abominations such as homosexuality. We know what they were trying to do to the 2 men that Lot brought into his house. Do you remember that story? Yeah, in Genesis 19:5, they say, bring them out to us that we may know them or have relations with them. Talking about the 2 angels. And then Lot said in verse 7, please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Don't act wickedly. Do not do this thing that ought not be done. He's appealing to something. You see what I mean? That something's wrong. Okay? Don't do this thing that ought not be done. So he is recognizing this is wicked. This is wrong. You might could say he's recognizing an objective moral truth and standard. Okay? That what they were attempting to do should not be done. Now, what he proposed after that is also something that ought not be done. he offered up his daughters instead. So, in the very act of recognizing one moral standard that shouldn't be done, he's willing to break another. And we could talk about that for a while, about how, people are sometimes inconsistent like that. I don't want to get into the whole lot discussion and all of that. The Bible does say he's righteous, but that, I know, it's confusing to our standards. But anyway, we're seeing that these moral values are there. They seem to be there. Let's look at another one. Bump over 2 chapters. Go to Genesis chapter 20. All right, in Genesis 20, Abraham moves on and journeys elsewhere, and he comes into the land of Gerar. Gerar. Probably not even pronouncing that right. But that's where he comes to. Well, in that land and in that place, there is a king there. Okay? The king's name is Abimelech. Good. You get a gold star. Anyway, no. So it's Abimelech. And Abraham is like, look, whenever we get here and as we're traveling about in this land, there's not a lot of good people here. So Sarah, from here on out, you're just going to say that you're my sister, all right? Even though, it was his wife. Technically, it was his sister, if you didn't know that. Half-sister. They had the same dad. Anyway. Yeah. But anyway, that's what he says to Sarah. He's like, look, just say that you're my sister. Okay? So, well, they come and they actually do come into contact with Abimelech. And Abimelech actually ends up taking her anyway. Because, well, if she's not your wife, I'm going to take her and she's going to be my wife. That was the thinking. All right? She's free, so to speak. Okay? So that kind of backfired on Abraham. He didn't want her to be taken, and then he took her anyway. But when Abimelech takes her, before he ever even gets to make a move on her, what does Genesis chapter 20 and verse 3 say? God comes to him in a dream. What does that say?
Oh, you're a dead man because the woman you had taken, she was married.
You're a dead man. That's scary. God comes to him in a dream and says, you're a dead man if you take this woman. She's married. And then he's like, in verses 5 and 6, he's like, he told me she was his sister. And she said so too, that he was, that was her brother. And then God says, indeed, I know that you did this out of the integrity of your heart. So I'm not exactly holding you accountable yet. I know that you did this out of the integrity of your heart. You have done this. And I also have held you back. I've held you back from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. That's interesting. Okay, so God said, if he would have done that, not that he could have done that because God was holding him back, but if he would have done that, it would have been wrong. It would have been sinful. And then you see actually down in verse 9, then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you? That you have brought on me and on my kingdom a great what? A great sin. And look what he says right there. You have done to me what? Things that ought not be done. This is exactly what we're talking about right here. You see, everybody understood that this was not good. This was not a good thing to do. Taking somebody's wife was not a good thing. They all understood that. Okay? They saw it as wrong and something that should not be. That's what he said. So, this is morality language right here in the text. morality language that he's using. They're recognizing this moral standard that's there, that there is an objective moral value in place that is innately wrong. Okay, and that all really backfired on Abraham, his whole plan, because he thought that these people in this place would not be moral. That's what he thought. And boy, there's a lesson there in there. Yeah, making judgment calls before we even know better. Right? And in this scene, Abimelech was found out to be more honorable than Abraham was. Great Abraham. He made a mistake. He made a judgment call that was not right. He judged the book by its cover, the classic right there. Right? And so Abimelech was found out to be more honorable. Abraham thought that people that were in that land were not moral people. And it just goes to show that even though people may not know God, can still be very moral people. They can still be very moral people.
Are they held accountable for being moral?
To their own conscience and standard, yes. And that's a whole nother thing. You had to throw that one out there, didn't you? Anyway, they can still exercise the right kind of morals, even if they may not know God. And I don't know to the degree that, what they did know God. Okay, we're not exactly told. But up in the context, I think Abimelech in the dream says something back, and he's like, would you do this to a righteous people? What is that, in verse 3 or 4? Anyway, he says of themselves that they're righteous in 4. Yeah. So, I don't know. That's interesting. But Genesis 20 is an excellent example of morality being something that was understood. And he literally says it. These things that ought not be. We are talking about the ought not be's. That's the whole case. All the ought nots and all the shoulds. Does that make sense? Morality. Okay? And then you've got Genesis chapter 39. What happened in that one? Joseph and who? Potiphar's wife. What happened? She seduced him? Tried to, yeah. Tried to seduce him. She tries to make advances onto Joseph, who was left in charge of Potiphar's house and all of his things. Okay? And then when nobody else was around, she shows up conveniently. Okay? And then look what he says. Look what he says in 39:9. There's no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, Potiphar's wife, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God? What did he recognize? What did he recognize? Yeah, it's wrong, and it would have been wrong. He recognized that to do that is wrong, and it would be wrong. He says it's a great evil and sin. In other words, it is morally wrong, and Joseph understood that. She did not, however. Or she didn't care.
I actually wonder how he thought it'd be safer if it was his sister instead of his wife. Thinking they went into town and made this, and my wife knew he was messing with it.
Oh, you talking about Abraham?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Why would he want to think it was his sister?
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of confusing. But even here, chapter 39, same deal. Okay? So, we can see these things in Scripture, an understanding of a moral standard. And, Russ, it is exactly what Paul describes in Romans chapter 2 as he is trying to get the point across about what Gentiles do. Go there now. Romans chapter 2. And somebody start reading in verse 12 and go all the way down to verse number 16. Romans 2, 12 through 16.
For all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law. And all who have sinned under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law who will be justified. For when Gentiles, who do not have a law, by nature do what law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have a law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness. Their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. On that day when, according to gospel, God judges the secrets of men by Christ Jesus.
Paul says right there exactly what we are trying to nail down. That even if there is no law, objective moral values still exist. Because Gentiles, they didn't have the law of Moses. They didn't have the thou shalt do this and thou shalt not do that. They didn't have that. That law was written only to the Hebrew people, the Israelite people, the nation of Israel, okay? Only the people of Israel had that. But he says, they still, the Gentile people, they still, though, naturally do the things that the law has in it. And the fact that they naturally do those things demonstrates that the objective moral values exist because they are written on people's hearts. That's why. Regardless if they have the law or not. In other words, as Brother Dan Owen put in his work, those people have a natural societal law that shapes their conscience. As a result, they have a sense of right and wrong that develops in their minds. These are objective moral values that exist, and since they exist, the best explanation as to why they exist and why there seems to be a moral law code is because there must be a lawgiver that put it there. That's the best explanation. I'm just saying, the Bible sheds light on the very heart of the matter. Are there objective moral values that exist that are right and wrong that go unspoken and not said? Yes. Yes, there are. They are instinctive and they are innately written on people's hearts. It is a natural right and wrong gauge, if you will, that we have within, even if there is no explicit law. Okay, people have a conscience. They have a moral awareness about them. And it points us to the existence of God. It testifies to the fact that there is God. And whether people believe that or not, that's what's true. Okay? Doesn't take it away just because people disagree. So, the Bible does confirm, no, you're not crazy. Right? You are recognizing something that's real and something that does exist. There is a moral awareness out there. There is this moral intuition that you might have that says this is right and this is wrong. What exists really is God's morality and imprint on us to seek things that are good and to know when something is morally wrong that ought not be. It's there naturally, and God put it within you.
1 Corinthians 11, doesn't even nature itself teach.
There you go. Nature itself. All right. Here's one way to put it about the moral argument. It's a syllogism. If God does not exist, then objective moral values do not exist. Objective values exist. Conclusion? God exists. Therefore, God exists. Listen, you may not come across anybody the rest of your days in your circle of people that deal with this stuff and who struggle with the existence of God and all of that. But I guarantee you, your kids will or your grandkids have already.
Or you might sit next to him on a ski lift.
You go skiing, be careful. Okay? You might not. But I'm telling you right now, it's still worth it to have these, because what happens when 15-year-old little Johnny starts getting questions or starts running into some things at the school, and now he wants to come to granddad or grandma or whoever, hey, what about this? Will you have an answer? They're going to go get an answer. What a shame it would be if we didn't have the right answer for them. Don't let the world give them that answer. Don't let the world give them those answers, because they will in a heartbeat. Okay? So it's vitally important to know this stuff. And, hopefully you've learned a little bit about it. You can talk to the person at the diner that brings you coffee all the time or whatever. Just spark up these conversations if you feel like you can. And man, hopefully this has been a good class.